We're going to hand over to our next panel, and for that I am going to hand over to the tech guru extraordinaire, that is Dave Savage. So Dave, over to you.
Good afternoon. Thanks for that intro. I'm not sure extraordinaire is exactly right. Have we got our panel? Is Ryan, Francesca, Deryck and Nadine here?
Yes.
I am. Got me, David.
Brilliant. Isn't this wonderful world where we can't quite see each other a joy? Look, completely arbitrarily, Ryan, you're the first name that I can see, obviously, to the left-hand side of the screen there. Do you just want to very quickly explain who you are?
Hi, yeah. So I'm Ryan Edwards. I'm founder and CEO of a music technology business called Audoo. And we monitor music around the world, and we work with performing rights organisations to deliver the data so they can better distribute royalties. So the global royalty industry is worth about $55 billion. You know, very, very topical, particularly the last 12 months with what COVID has gone through. Lots of artists not being able to tour and make money in their traditional sense. So all of a sudden, royalties have become a very, very core income stream for them, and we're there supporting them.
Absolutely. And you were once a musician who had a song out, so very much a personal story. Francesca, do you want to explain a little bit about yourself and Molo very quickly?
Yeah, hello. Hi, everybody. I'm not sure I can activate my video, but hopefully you can hear me. So, yeah, so Molo is in the fintech space. Okay, seems like it's working out. So I'm founder CEO of Molo, who is a digital mortgage lender here in the UK. What we do, we digitize mortgages. So effectively, we like to allow everybody to get a mortgage going forward in a matter of minutes rather than weeks. Now, as you might imagine, this has been quite relevant in the last year as we've been all stuck at home and nothing could happen physically. So yeah, it's a very modern way to think about mortgages.
Brilliant. Deryck, would you say a few words and introduce yourself?
Absolutely. Thank you, David, and good afternoon to everyone. So Deryck Mitchelson, the Director of Digital Security for the NHS up in Scotland. So I'm part of the NHS called National Services of Scotland. We provide management of the large national infrastructures across the NHS, the network backbones, and all the bits that hang all the data and networks and infrastructure together. So for the last year, I've been very much around big data, around COVID testing data, vaccinations data, lateral flow, a whole lot of things, clinical terms I've probably never been involved in before that suddenly I'm getting asked lots of questions on. But it's probably never been more sad to be managing systems during a pandemic, but never been more busy.
Yeah, quiet year for you, absolutely. And look, lastly, but certainly by no means least, Nadine.
Sure. So hi, David. Hi, everyone. So I am the Global Chief Technology Officer for MediaCom. So MediaCom is a media agency, so we're part of WPP. And we design communication strategies, advertising strategies for some really cool brands, so PlayStation, Adidas, Dell. Some of you are probably on the call today. And my career is working across lots of different industries. Aside from technology, I am also on the board of Visit England. So I'm focused on helping us get the National Tourism Agency and tourism back on its feet, as well as we kind of start that back up in the economy around that.
So look, this is the last session before the big announcement. Yeah, we've got quite an act to follow with after all the speakers, but equally I've just been told that we've got about 10 minutes extra. So anyone who's watching this is probably going to be a little bit longer than planned, just whilst the winner is confirmed. I think we'll not go into too much detail there, but we've got about 10 minutes extra. I've got some questions prepared, but that does mean that they probably won't last the whole session. So if you're watching, we do have a Q&A function. Please help me out, submit some questions. Your questions are probably better than mine anyway. However, let's start, and I'll come to you, Ryan, on this first question. Right at the top of the event, Bev, the Harvey Nash CEO, talked about the fact that we need to be empathetic and we need to show compassion for people. Whilst this session is all around innovation is so much more than technology in the last year. How have you managed to keep your teams engaged and productive, especially in this third lockdown where it's been so tough on so many?
Yeah, I think you're right. I think I always see the three lockdowns, actually. The first one almost was a bit of a novelty. I think none of us had ever been through it. You know, the second one was relatively short, and I think as we came into this third one, it was very much about the unknown. We've spent a lot of time on the health of the team, just physically and mentally. So, and this was everything from, you know, what I would describe as silly things. So, you know, every day we would say to the team, right, nobody's allowed a meeting between 3 and 4 p.m. You must go for a walk, and you've got to find a dog that's, you know, blonde or yellow, or you've got to find a tree in a certain shape or a cloud in a certain shape. And it was very much about how we just got them out of their normal environment. I think, you know, particularly technologists and you know, entrepreneurial businesses like ours, it's always about, you know, running at 1,000,000 miles an hour and just getting the job done. And actually, I think we, as the first lockdown happened, saw a bit of an opportunity to say, okay, great, you know, in a startup journey, when does anybody ever get to say to a startup, okay, look, you can't launch your product because you know you probably got this six months to a year where nobody's going to put any pressure on you and you can just breathe. And of course, our natural instinct was, no, we're just going to work even harder, even longer hours, and we're going to be even more ahead of where we want it to be. So we've done lots of things. You know, we do Zoom quizzes, which I always lose at. You know, we just and things like, you know, just bits like in the business, you know, we've had excess budget. You know, none of us have traveled for a year. So we've been able to say at the end of some months, well, you know what? Let's just buy a takeaway for everybody and their family, you know, just as a really, really nice thing to do for everybody. And then the final thing, which is one of the things I love, Jess on the team created a weekly Zoom with the team. And it's the meeting with no agenda, and they will literally go on it. And there is no agenda at all, and they'll talk about anything from the music they're listening to, you know, people who are struggling because they can't get on the dating scene because, of course, they can't meet anybody, and generally just have fun. And actually, most of the time, the C team don't even get invited as well. So, you know, it really is one. And sometimes you overhear snippets of just funny things that have happened, or where people bring their dog in or their kids in, and all those kind of things. And I think, actually, although we've been further apart, you know, because we've all been living behind a screen, I would probably say that our team is closer than ever, because you've got an insight into everybody's life. As I sit looking at this Zoom, I can see the co-panelists, and, you know, you can see people's probably living rooms. There's a fantastic picture behind Nadine, which I'm very intrigued by. And I think that's it. You know, we've all got this insight into each other's lives now from that work from home environment. And, you know, luckily my daughter's at nursery today, so I know that she's not going to come running up, but the amount of Zooms that she's arrived on with, you know, large clients and investors, but it just makes it more personal, and I think that's been our big success through this. Right,
just very quickly, how many staff are you now? It's about 100. Is that right?
No. So we're approaching the 30 mark.
Oh, 30. Sorry. Yeah.
Yeah, we're a two-year-old business, exploded very quickly, but yeah, kind of 30 people right now.
So look, it's a much smaller business nonetheless than, say, Deryck or Nadine, the organizations in which you work. And I mean, Nadine, listening to Ryan there, I imagine there's some elements of that you can absolutely relate to, but it must be harder when, you know, MediaCom, absolutely huge global business with users all over the place. I suppose creating that team cohesion isn't quite as easy when you can't get the whole company on one call.
It's really tough. I kind of envy some of the stuff Ryan's talking about. It sounds really fun and cool. So MediaCom's like 8,000 staff across 100 countries. So that does add quite a few complexities. We do some of, I suppose we do some of the things Ryan has actually spoken about, like things like meetings you can just drop into. Rather than meetings are social, we can just drop into to kind of create that kind of community spirit. Also, the company is, because it's a larger company, it's able to offer some structured support around things like mental health. We have sort of a mental health day people can take off one day, you know, just for the year at the moment, to help people talk about mental health, because that's obviously become a big focus during the lockdowns. And I think the organisation also has an appreciation of the different circumstances people have. Like, some of our staff are really young. That's kind of their first job. Media is quite a young industry, and they're working from their bedrooms in a share house, so they don't have any other space to go to, and they spend their entire day there. So it's kind of being cognizant of that. And then we've got a lot of, obviously, parents homeschooling, and I'm sure many people on the call can relate to that. So there's the kind of company structures, and then I'd say on a team level, and the sort of things I've been focused on are really things around communication and transparency. I think people are tired, and also I think a little bit on edge in some cases, because it's been going on for quite a while now. So I think that communication is really important. So we're doing global town halls, weekly newsletters, we have a team website, just making sure that people know what's happening and celebrating successes. So the smallest success I'm probably much more of a deal about than I would have in the last 6 months, and perhaps I would have 2 years ago. And just, I think one more thing just on kind of engaging and sort of supporting your teams, I think it's balancing showing vulnerability as a leader when I'm having a groundhog day, and also needing to balance being a motivator and sort of creating optimism and positivity in the team. And so I think as a leader, we've got quite a balance and an important leadership responsibility to do that.
Mm. Deryck, I suppose your perspective on this would be really interesting, because the other three panelists, to a degree, kind of have a level playing field. Everyone is either could be in the office or they could be at home. Your organization is supporting a whole range of different users in very different circumstances, right? And obviously with the healthcare professionals, they're on the front line, they're in physical environments. Listening to Ryan and Nadine speak, how alien an experience is that to the one, I suppose, that you've gone through over the last year? Or actually, are there similarities there that might be surprising?
Yeah, it's exactly the same for the teams that I'll manage, the digital data security networking teams. But we've just got to be very aware that we have got a huge percentage of the workforce that is still working. They're still working in the old ways. They're still coming in to the office when they come in, or coming into the hospitals or the trusts. We've got distribution, delivery drivers, we have got blood transfusion. So we're always cognizant of the fact that not everyone's working in a changed way, and that brings that. I think you're always playing things safe that way. You can't always then start shouting about this is how we want to work, this is what we want to do. Wellness becomes a big piece, but you have to try and balance the wellness of those that are coming in working on the front line alongside those that are actually trying to look after mental health and working long hours during the day. And sometimes that brings these tensions. That's probably the bit I think that might be unique to organisations like the NHS, that you're always getting reminded that we're two workforces now. We're a workforce that stays at home and works, and then we're a workforce that can't do that and has to go in and work on the front line, and that makes them quite challenging. But for the digital and data side of things that I'll manage, it's exactly the same thing as Nadine and Ryan has said. One of the things I've started doing since the pandemic, because we're working much longer hours, instead of working 8-9 hours, I think mostly we're working 12-13 hours, and the team is doing a lot more rotation of staff. So I rotate out my senior team a lot more, take them off programs, put other people in, explain to them none of this is to do with non-delivery or success. It's my analogy is like a football game, saying, I want to keep freshening things up, bringing in new talent, bringing in those that have got better ideas, maybe those that have got some energy, new energy, because it's been so intense, and we've got lots of people that just talk about, we've done this from March and we've had no time off. They're now starting to get tired. And that's very difficult when we're getting messaging from Scottish Government around speed up the vaccination programme. We need to get vaccinating more people. What can we do to speed things up? And the staff are really weary. All the promises I've given around, one more push and we'll be there. It just always seems to be another push. So it's quite tough.
Yeah.
An interesting question that's just come in from, I'm afraid it's an anonymous source, but innovation is mostly best done collaboratively. What has the panel learned from working remotely to help improve digital innovation in their organizations going forward? I suppose, Deryck, I might stick with you initially on that one. Any initial thoughts to that question?
Yeah, absolutely. Again, I'll touch on just I joined the previous session to this as well, and there was a big talk about data-driven decisions, and we've done a lot on data-driven innovation, as you can imagine, from getting the first PCR test that came through the COVID labs back in February. We started getting these through as to how we start to not just pull the data in, but really use that data to innovate. So, I found myself working a lot closer with medical directors, chief medical officers for the government in Scotland here, where we probably wouldn't do that, to say to them, we've got really good data coming in. what do you want us to do in order to put that into data science platforms? How can we slice these up? Can we use things like predictive analytics in order to actually forecast or predict where we're going to have some spots, some bursts or spots or hotspots? So I think we've been more innovative around that data space, is what I would say. We've done all the usual things that like most organizations have around Office 365, home working, the collaboration. These type things were just a given, but it's driving forward that data agenda that has been the big innovator, I think, within Scotland.
Francesca, just to bring you into the conversation, and if we pull on that point of collaboration and pick out one of the questions, this one's coming from Danny Lyons. How do you embed a culture that scales as you do? Obviously, those collaboration tools is going to have been particularly important to the culture, but you're a digital first business. You've only been around for 2 years. So I assume this is something that is all very kind of in your DNA, right? It's not been a massive change from the way that you're operating.
Yeah, I think that's super interesting and super important question. I think, yes, that's correct. So I think probably we are a little bit slightly different type of companies. So we are also quite new, quite young. We are 40 people in total, probably closer to where Ryan is. And we are all about innovation. So technology is the heart of our business. And we have always been working in a very collaborative way, even before, right? So working from home was not something new for us. So, and in fact, I think has been welcomed by everybody on the team, but also being able to work in a fluid, let me say, environment, agile, and all this was already, kind of embedded in the culture. I think, however, I think I would say two things to the point, raised here between collaboration and, being more remote. So on one side, I have to say, in a team like ours, where collaboration is also something you live every day. So we used to just have a lot of whiteboarding sessions, a lot of brainstorming sessions. You need to be in the same room. I must say that we missed that a bit. And so we had to recreate some moments, some alternative ways to get that same kind of creative spirits to exchange views. And I have to say that if there is one aspect where I think remote working is more difficult, is exactly in that how do you collaboratively exchange ideas without being scripted, right, in a way? So, and I think what we did is that we then created a moments, we created meetings where it just is a workshop, so something where it's a brainstorming, we're using different tools virtually. But I realized that this was, is probably the only, was a little bit of a difficult thing, but it can be overcome. And we realized that we all adapt. After a few months that we were in this situation and people embrace the idea that you can have exchange views and have a brainstorming meeting even online, right? So what I would say is collaboration can continue, and it did continue for us, but you need to kind of evolve and not expect that you can do exactly the same as before. The second point I will make, though, more on the positive side, is that I actually, a positive surprise of being remote was that on the collaborative side was that because you're more remote, so naturally you don't talk to each other very often. So I think what I found out, there was much more creativity coming from the team and, spontaneously, because, you have a problem, you say, okay, we solve the problem. And then effectively, there was spontaneous collaborations with different tools happening more bilaterally. And then, having very creative ideas being brought up without having a lot of structure on them. So I think it's, I would say probably for us, it's not been a big struggle because we are always used to work in this way. But in fact, it had some positive surprise as well. So.
Okay, picking up on that point then around positive surprises and talking about creativity from the team. Ryan, I mean, as a technology leader, I suppose there's this slight tension now between flexibility and control, right? Because on the one hand, I've got all sorts of kit that I've bought that needs software installed on my computer. I must have been an absolute bloody nightmare to our technology department over the last year because I want to play with all sorts of toys when I'm at home. You must want to embrace that, right? And let your users kind of experiment and do things that are new and different, especially in this environment. But at the same time, it's increased security concerns. It might be a stress on your infrastructure. How do you manage that slight dilemma?
True. And I think I was just going to, as Francesca was talking, there was something key. And when she talked about that creativity, what we found actually, within our teams, yes, we are a small organization right now that's growing at a rapid pace. But we were finding that we were kind of getting like subsets within the teams as well. So somebody would have an idea, and go to our head of tech and say, hey, what about this? And he would say, well, why don't you go and work on it with, and it was almost like just a pair of them that would go away, spend a few days and then come back and do it that way. Because I think we all know trying to get 30 people on a Zoom is near impossible. But if you have two, having that kind of bounce off, be it via Slack, WhatsApp, whatever the service is, or even on the old fashioned phone, they can just have those conversations and they collaborate and then they bring it into everybody else. And then you kind of open it and do it that way. As far as playing and everything goes, you know, we're funny because I think everybody hears technology is disruptive, and you know we're in the music industry. If you ever want see an industry that doesn't embrace technology and has fought against, you know, file sharing, Napster, streaming, you name it, they fought against it. We've been very lucky in that we've been embraced very well. The challenge that we have is we're very focused, of course, with performing rights organisations for royalties. That's our mission. That's everything we're doing. We're driving fair and accurate distribution across there. What we now get on a daily basis is phone calls from some of the biggest record labels, the biggest publishers, even the biggest artists going, hey, I hear you guys have got loads of cool data and I'm like planning a tour, or, you know, we're doing really well in K-pop right now. Should we keep signing K-pop bands because we think that's a really cool trend? Or, you know, is there something else that you're seeing, you know, happening in clubs in Australia or happening on the continent of Europe and all those kind of things, which is also interesting, you know, when many of these clubs and places are closed as well. I think from our side is we'll always embrace it to say, okay, you know, I always go back to what's the commercial reason. So, you know, politely, you know, we've raised investment, we have to deliver a return for investors. So how can we make money from it, you know, in a fair and true way? How can it deliver a really, really good service? And then, of course, we'll then work backwards through, as you say, all of the IT security and any of those kind of bits that we had, you know, nowhere near on the scale I'm sure Deryck has, and, you know, everything that those guys have to work through. But, you know, we're very open, and I think we're lucky, we're agile. You know, I'm lucky in my career that I've, you know, been in organizations like Deryck. You know, I was head of digital at Visa Europe, so, you know, trying to change things in Visa, it's pretty difficult. You know, somebody says, hey, I want to change the core payment network. You're like, well, we've got 120 million cards in the UK. We can't let that go down for a minute, right? So we go through that to now being a super agile, super quick to evolve organization. And I think we're very embracing of it. And then the other thing is we have somebody, so we have, you know, one person on the team whose specific job is to look at new things. So he's called our innovation manager, Hash. And, you know, I'm sure the guys will echo, you know, LinkedIn, I probably get 100+ messages a day from people trying to sell me recruitment services, data services, all the different things that they want to sell to you. And there's always those few little nuggets that you go, oh, that could be really, really interesting for us. And, you know, I always send it to Hash and say, hey, do you just want to explore it? And he's typically looking 9 to 12 months out to say, right, I'm going to do a little rapid prototype, you know, in kind of my time, so it doesn't impact the wider organization. And if we think it's a go, then we green light it, we build the business case, and off we go.
So picking up on that point, right, you're musing there about Deryck's situation. You're explaining about the brilliance of your agile environment and how helpful that is, and then talking about kind of what nuggets you might be able to look at a little bit further down the line. We've had a question that's come in stating that the panel is 2 startups, scale-ups, and 2 CIOs from big enterprises. So what innovation tip would you share with each other? I think it follows on quite neatly from what you were talking about. So what do the startups do that could help enterprises, and what do the enterprises do that could help startups? So Deryck, what do the enterprises do that could help startups?
It's a great question. We've actually changed the way we work, I think, to be a bit more like a startup. Just during the pandemic, you know, it's NHS. Our primary goal was to keep the public safe, and that's, you know, it's about healthcare. It's about that's what we're there to do, and we tend not to take risks. During the pandemic, we became an organisation that I think turned around to optimize risks instead. Risk was seen as an opportunity. Now, when I say things like that, it was, you know, we built ourselves contact tracing systems within 6 weeks, which we would never look to do. Normally that would go through compliance groups, governance groups, it would go through audit committees, financial committees that have a look at all these things before you would go near putting anything ready. So my mantra at the moment is being 80% is good enough. We just need to MVP. We don't need to aim for perfection. You know, we need to be quick. What I keep saying is, you know, I do come from a private sector background. That was all about being first to market. You know, if you were second, then you wanted to become first. You know, it was about the pace and taking risks. I think now as an organisation, we embrace risks. Difficult for us is going to be actually after the pandemic, where we start getting pressure to say keep going at the same pace. and we can't keep going at the same pace. We're nearing at burnout. So for me, as I say, we've very much flipped round to working probably the way I worked in some of the smaller organisations before the NHS. It's all about agility, having a look at risk, and MVP, 80% is good enough.
Nadine, you're the other large organisation. Do you echo a lot of what Deryck says there?
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. I'd say a similar themes to what Deryck has said. I think on top of that, I have two things. I think perhaps the startups, or sort of a contrast between big organisations and startups. One is, I suppose, we have the advantage, the benefit might be a better word, of having a very regionally diverse and therefore very diverse workforce. Like I have 8,000 people scattered around 100 countries, so we've got a diverse mindset to help us innovate. And for example, so I very much encourage innovation at the edges, because that's where it happens. It happens down where where somebody's encountering a challenge, or can see a business challenge or an opportunity with their client, or in their own domain, in their functional expertise. So we've had, for example, in Australia, we had a great innovation of an e-commerce audit product, which has helped our clients establish how their products are performing on e-commerce sites, like, for example, supermarket sites, and where they're not working, where they are. And that was an innovation that happened down in Australia. So that's kind of one aspect. The second aspect is, I suppose, how we scale. So we enable all this innovation at the edges within, I suppose, frameworks of what people can actually create and access. And then we sort of encourage people to bring these ideas forward to a product board, which then we kind of then work out which ones we have the business benefit and which ones we'll put our money behind and scale. So I suppose that's maybe I don't know if it's contrast, a tip, but that's I suppose my kind of thoughts on perhaps how we're approaching innovation, which may have similarities or may have differences to startups.
Okay, and let's flip this on the head. Francesca, what's your advice to our enterprise businesses?
Well, I mean, I can talk generically. It seems like you guys are doing a lot already. So, but in general, I did spend all my career in banking before being a startup. So I can reflect on that. I would say two things, right? What I learned, and I think I would recommend to any bank or any big corporate organization. One, I would call it let go. And let go is a little bit about empower, decentralize a little bit what Nadine seems to be doing already, but effectively don't necessarily think about organizational setup, reporting lines and top down, but be a little bit more bottom up. Let people take initiative, let them be creative, and you'll be surprised. I actually had to, switch a little bit my mindset on that, but effectively it's about losing, too many not control framework in a regulatory way, but in terms of hierarchical decision making and so on. I think there are amazing people out there, the young people especially, they have a lot of ideas, just kind of believe in that empower, and magic things will happen that you not even imagine. I think the second one I would say is more about, it's a little bit about what Deryck seems to be doing already, which is just take risk and make things happen, and don't just forget the process, focus on outcomes. So it's effectively take decision, move fast, and just go for it. It's not perfect, it's MVP, but unless you go for it, you never know. Again, I mean, I can just reflect on my experience. I tended to want to get things perfect, and I realized you never move, right? And in big organizations, there is a lot of process, a lot of committees, there's a lot of, ticking one box after the other, which I know some of this is needed, but you'd be surprised how much of that is actually not strictly needed if you really need to do something. And for me, COVID was really an evidence of that. A lot of people, as you guys said before, in 6 weeks or in 3 weeks, something happened and usually would have taken 3 years. So then we should think why. I mean, they're the same people, same brain power, same money, right? So it's just that effectively, when you act on necessity, you strip out everything that is not needed. And I think that's what startup leads every day. So we are always on a life or death situation. So then you're forced to go for what's really needed. And I think sometimes it's a great forcing device also for larger companies.
No offense, Ryan, you've had the most thinking time. No pressure, rather. kind of, we're expecting fireworks now.
It's really funny. And actually, I think the first thing we should probably say is to Deryck and his team, congratulations on the app, because I started my career 12 years ago, you know, creating apps for retailers and for sports organizers and everything. To do wireframes took 6 weeks, not alone, you know, release it and get it out to quite literally millions of people. I just think it's, you know, watching from the sidelines, you know, it's been, you know, watching a big organization like the NHS achieve that was phenomenal. I think the second side, and you talk about innovation culture, you know, the one of the reasons I left corporate career was, you know, everything works in 5-year cycles. It was like you'd hear the word transformation, which when I heard it, I just wanted to be sick, because C teams in corporate organizations typically last 3 years. So if they're on a 5-year roadmap, they're not even going to get halfway through it. And actually, transformation and innovation is a way of life. It's not something, and technology, you know, come on, do we honestly know what's going to be available in 5 years? You know, it hasn't even been thought of right now, you know, what the next great thing is, or somebody might be thinking of it, hopefully watching this in their bedroom and thinking, you know, how they can impact, how they're going to go and raise money, and how they're going to create a tangible business model of it. Innovation should be a way of life. My view is always there should be this kind of 3 to 5 year roadmap plan of what you want to do, but actually, you know, look at how development sprints work, you know, no more normally than 5 days. So I would be saying, well, look, this is the 5-year goal. However, this is what we're going to work on for the next 6 to 12 months. And you know, at the end of that block, then you stand back, you reiterate, and you take that view on what you're going to do next, because the plan will change. It's that, you know, it's that thing, and you see it in, you know, like lots of life coaches, your planning life goes this from 0 to billionaire, and there's never going to be a bump in it. It's exactly the same in innovation. And that's how we see it. You know, it is a way of life.
I noticed when Deryck was talking, Nadine, you started nodding vigorously when he started talking about, you know, keeping going at the same pace. There's going to be some burnout. And then they're listening to Ryan talking about roadmaps. There seems to be this growing gap, right, between business and shifting customer expectations. I suppose it's placing a bit of pressure between what execs and what CEOs want to happen versus what's maybe technically possible. And that might be placing pressure on the technology leader, right?
I don't know if it's not technically possible. I think the pressure I see, because I see C-suite a little bit tired as well. I think that there is a huge, you know, COVID, the pandemic has changed a lot of things in work and life, and so businesses are having to adapt to it. Full stop. And that means that, you know, to adapt, you need to put in plans in place to actually adapt. And I think it feels like everyone's running to kind of transform, sorry, Ryan, but to change, to change and keep up. I think one of the things I think we need to do is almost take a breath. And there has been so much change, and it's really tough because, I mean, if you're in Deryck's place in the NHS, I'd rather you didn't take a breath and get going with those vaccines right now, but we almost do need to take a breath and kind of adopt and embed change. I think we're kind of like changing on a changing platform, which is difficult. I think just coming sort of back to what you're asking as well, David, I would say when it comes to technology solutions at the moment, I think we need to think really flexibly. So, I mean, if you're going to, you know, do an infrastructure solution, obviously it's going to be cloud, like as a, you know, kind of very, very simple example. Because things are changing so fast. So what was the plan for, you know, 3 months time, all of a sudden is we've got a new plan. So it's kind of, I suppose the solutions that we're putting forth have to be able to go in different directions than perhaps they would have had to in the past.
There's a question that's come in that I think is quite interesting. Look, this is the UKtech50. It's you know, it's the coming together of the leaders of this particular industry. And we've been asked, I'll just read this out. I'm really interested in the growing debate around tech ethics, things like AI, privacy, sustainability, data analytics, online harms, etc. This is going to be a growing issue for tech innovators. What advice could the panel give on how we manage these sorts of issues? And I think this is particularly prevalent because, let's face it, technology leaders have a big responsibility, have a big role to play in post-COVID Britain, right? Especially in the way that customers are now interacting with the services that you all provide. Deryck, I pick on you first. I saw you kind of nodding as I was reading out the question. What thoughts do you have on that?
You know, it's never been more important, I think, when you're doing things at pace, that you get the privacy by design elements done right up front, and also realise that there's expertise out there around AI, ethics, etc. When we started building our contact tracing systems, we kicked off weekly sessions with the Information Commissioner's Office up in Scotland. So we were keen, rather than delivering something to turn around and say this is what we've done, we were keen to actually get them involved in our sprints, funnily enough, which we'd never thought of doing before, David. So and they were so open to working with us. Okay, we're a big organisation, so they obviously can't do it with organisations of all sizes, etc. But I agree with the question. It's never been more important. You in the NHS, if our the public in Scotland, the citizens, lose confidence in what we are doing and how we're using the data, then the whole game, the whole house of cards falls down. It's so fundamentally important, and I think up in Scotland we've done a really good job of that. We've not had any of the issues. I know they've had quite a few issues with some of the proximity apps and other things down in England that I think they've jumped and then tried to actually do these things further along the lines. But we've definitely right at the start said we need to get the security right, the ethics right, we need to get the privacy by design piece right as well. I don't think we've done an awful lot in the AI space. I think that's a space of learning for us in Scotland. We've got a lot of data, and I think we're still working out how we can use that data better and what the predictive AI elements of that can actually be. But it'd be the same in any program now for us, that it has worked so well. We need to make sure we embed these learnings in right at the start of any piece of work. It's you try and put it at the end, it'll be difficult. You've got to do it up front.
For anyone tuned in, by the way, awaiting the results of the top 50, I've just...
David, I think you're on mute.
Yeah,
You're on mute, David.
He's muted.
Sorry, I was muted by the host, apparently. That's a good sign, isn't it? I was just saying we're going to wrap this up in a couple of minutes, but just before we do, because I've been told that we're good to go to the results in a couple of minutes. Just before we do, Francesca, you're the other person on this panel that is dealing, I suppose, with very personal data, working in mortgages. It's not quite health data, but at the same time, buying a house, incredibly personal to a lot of people. How do you reflect on that question around ethics and data?
Yeah, I think it's very important, and I reflect in a way that there can be no compromise, and that's what I would say here to everybody, and especially the person that asked this question. For me, ethics, or the modern version of ethics, which is how do you treat data, what's behind data privacy and all of these things, compliance is our license to operate, and I do think that it's super important. The way that I interpret this is our red line. So we are a startup. We do things. We need to move fast. We don't have a lot of money, but since the beginning, we have embedded by design the concept of doing things properly. So my advice, given that this is what been asked, is to consider everything, all these topics very seriously, and don't compromise on those, especially if you are a tech leader, because today you can do fantastic things from a technology perspective. Unfortunately, if they breach a kind of ethical barrier, they're terrible things. And I think fundamentally the way I think about it is that whoever is in technology today has great power. So as we know, from a great power comes a big responsibility as well. So on these, I'm completely black and white.
I want to thank you all for your contributions and for staying with us for a few minutes extra whilst the procedures for the next part of the event were wrapped up. So thank you all very much for your time, and we'll hand back to Liz.
Thank you.
Thank you.